We design e-learning as an organisation, and been doing it for many years, and I'm still amazed every day at how creative some people are, how they can just see things that other people can't see, how they can apply creativity to really quite complex problems again and again. It's at the heart of the learning designer's role, but it's so often neglected, it's rushed. We live in such busy worlds that it's the stage often which we cut corners on. It's because it's difficult, it is really hard to be creative again and again when challenged with different problems. But to be creative, we just need to live a creative life. And that's really what I want to talk about today. So I went away and did a bit of digging about creativity, what underpins it. So a bit of background, a few creative geniuses out there. What do they represent? How do they tick? And then some techniques which we've introduced to our organisation to help our designers break through some of the traditional barriers of creativity to come up with novel solutions. So hopefully there's going to be some takeaways there for you as well. First of all, hello creative people. How many learning designers have we got here? How many people who are charged with being creative day to day? Okay, a few reticent ones there, but how many people really struggle with it? Is it a bottleneck? Yes, so maybe a few are undecided, but yeah, it is. It's hard work. We find it hard as well. Sometimes you do get stuck in a rut. Why is it important? What we need here is some good old statistics. I'm quite passionate about research, so I put these together, which you've probably seen before. Some percentages about how impatient our learners are. You know, all the evidence is out there to say people have just got so little time nowadays. What percentage of people abandon a website after 5 seconds if it doesn't load? 32%. I mean, this is web browsing, but you know, apply that to the workplace. This is what we're up against. How much of web content is actually read by people? 20%. And this is based on research. You know, there's quite a substantial study behind this. They can prove it. People quitting a video. After 30 seconds, you've lost a third of your audience. After 60 seconds, they reckon almost 100% of people have gone, regardless of how good it is. Okay, so this is web browsing, probably quite young people, but apply that to the workplace. We're up against similar percentages. It's a real challenge. How do we cater for this? I think creativity is at the heart of meeting this challenge. It's one weapon we've got to try and engage people, trying to grab their emotion again and again, to try and deal with some of these issues. What's it all about? Who's this? Banksy, or a copy, one of the hundreds of copies artists that seem to be out there. What makes that so good? I mean, it's combining things in unusual ways from a perspective that you've probably never seen before. And what does that say? It says, well, that's something very old with something very new. And it makes us think, well, actually, is graffiti just storytelling? And we should actually leave it on the walls? Is that kind of a change of mindset going on there? It's about seeing things. It's about seeing patterns. I would never have come up with that. It's genius. And there are hundreds of examples of these on the web, which I just curate myself, just to try and inspire myself. There are more. Name the film. Top prize if you get it right. I presume you've seen the film. Okay. Again, clever. The distillation of something very complex into one picture. As you can, you won't forget that. I think if you watch the film, you probably would forget most of it, but that is a great summary of the essence of that entire film. I just love this sort of thing. So that's creativity, I think. There's different types, but in essence, it's making us think differently. Okay, interactive. I'd like you to read that, and if you're sitting next to someone, I'd like you to answer those 3 questions with the person next to you.
Where would you go if school was cancelled? What would you do? What would you see? 10 seconds. Speak to someone. Now, change of scene. You're now 7 years old. Think about answers to the same question. What changes? What sort of things were you saying? Well, I might go for a walk. I might go to the cinema. If you're 7 years old, I'll go to the park. I'll make a raft. We're being given permission to think like a child. Now, there's a study behind this. I think there was quite a significant number of undergraduates were given but two types of question. The ones that got this question, the responses were just wild. They were unhindered because they were given permission to think like a child. And I found that quite interesting. It's this childlike attitude to creativity, I think, is something we need to pick up. So what's going on there? Who draws monsters in a meeting? We might doodle, but I think if we were drawing monsters, we'd probably get some raised eyebrows around the room. Or I think maybe someone does draw monsters over there. Why do kids do it? Why don't we do it as adults? What happens to us? Well, we get more serious, don't we? You know, our intellect takes over. We become very self-aware. We start to control things in meetings and think, well, how will people judge me if I draw a monster in this meeting? Well, I don't think it will go down too well. We start to think about how we reflect on other people. But thinking like a child actually is a very powerful thing. Not acting like a child, I think that's something completely different. But thinking like a child is a really powerful thing to kind of breaking through this creative barrier that a lot of people experience. And in the workplace, often when you sit in creative meetings, some people just sit there and they just don't contribute very much. But given this responsibility, as in you can just say what you want, do what you want, it's very effective for people who are usually quite introvert. So let's think about how we can give people that permission to think differently. So I did a bit of research on, there's a wonderful TED talk by this precocious, I mean there's this wonderful young lady, she's incredible actually. It's a short one, but she talks about what adults can learn from kids. So she really turns the tables on adult behaviour and critiques it from a child's perspective. And there's just a couple of things that jump out for me. One quote she's got there is optimism. Kids have just got so much optimism about them. You know, they really are almost like the first day on the job. It's that sort of attitude of, I can achieve anything here. But also, they don't care about the past or the future. They're just in the present. They're thinking about now. I mean, often you think of a solution and think, well, no, I can't use that because it didn't work last time. But kids don't think like that. They've just got this bubbling passion for doing things differently. So that's worth a look. She's quite remarkable, actually. Now, talking about putting things together in unusual ways, I bet you didn't know that Einstein played guitar. Well, he didn't. It's a fake. But it certainly makes you think differently about the creative mind. I think that guitar was invented 20 years after he actually passed away. But he had a view on creativity as well. Well, he had many views on creativity. And that one kind of struck a chord with me. Why should we think that us, who create the problems, can solve them? His attitude is you need to go to a different place to solve problems within his environment, but we can apply this to the workplace as well. Is this one of the main issues we've got? Is that we're trying to solve problems with the same mindset? And again, it's this child thing coming in again here. We need to have a different mind. We need to give the right brain permission to work to achieve this. And there's some great examples out there of where creativity is being quashed. This is John Lennon's school report. I don't know if you can read that, but he was accused of silliness, chewing, whatever that was, talking, impudence. Interestingly, Paul McCartney and George Harrison had the same music teacher. I'm not sure if it was the same school, but they had the same music teacher. Now, this music teacher didn't recognize any musical talent amongst those two. Imagine having half the Beatles in your class and not recognizing any musical talent. I think it just shows really how it starts at such a young age. There's another great example as well. This is a response to the first script of Fawlty Towers that was submitted to the BBC. I'm not sure who this Ian Main was, but he clearly didn't like it. But thankfully, it was ignored and it got through, and now we have goose-stepping John Cleese every Christmas. So, there are a lot of barriers to these people who come up with these genius ideas that sometimes they get through, and thank God they do. You'll know this guy, Ken Robinson. He's the obvious person to include in it. He goes on and on about creative kids and how creativity is quashed in the classroom. This is a particularly good one. Note to self, jump to 5:30. So I'm just going to play a very short clip from this because it really distills the essence of what we've been talking about. What happens if we are prepared to be wrong? I like beardy old men, as you can probably gather here. I look back at history, at creative geniuses who were prepared to be wrong. You'll know the first one. It's obvious. Darwin. He was certainly a risk taker. I mean, to take on the religious establishment when he did, he was ridiculed for years, but he took that risk. Instead of going to church, he went for a walk. I mean, he just turned his back on it, and we all know what happened. He stuck by what he believed in, and obviously the rest is history. Edison, light bulb inventor, 2,000 experiments before he got a light bulb that actually worked. Imagine that, 2,000 wrong outcomes. Eventually it worked. He was so fanatical about experimentation, he actually proposed to his wife using Morse code. I think he was taking it a little bit far in that situation, but he was a man in the labs, obviously. Have we got any organic chemists in the audience? I'd be very impressed. This is Kekulé. So one thing I do remember from chemistry, he actually conceived the benzene ring. It was like the hexagonal structure. He imagined it in a dream as a snake swallowing its own tail. I think he was on some chemicals himself when he came up with that, but I put down as a daydreamer. Imagine, I just like those three words, those three expressions we got there. Risk, experimentation, dreaming. In my mind, that's quite a nice summary of what creativity might be. It clearly worked for these guys. So I wanted to look a little deeper into how these guys work. Let's look at the practicalities of being creative on a day-to-day basis. There's a really nice summary of that on this graph I'm about to show you. Look at this site, it's really nice. Someone, I don't know how they've done it, they've actually summarized the working patterns of creative people, past creative masters, if you like. And there's some quite interesting stuff going on here. I do like the fact that Beethoven had only 60 beans in his cup of coffee. There's elements of OCD going on there. Mozart, I like this one. Any man that takes over an hour to get dressed in the morning has got my vote. And Dickens takes an hour to wake up and then goes for a walk, etc. But what is interesting, if we just only look at the creative, I was hoping to see a pattern here, as in, oh gosh, it must all fit within 9 to 5, but of course it doesn't. There's no pattern at all. I mean, most of them working in the middle of the night, for goodness sake. So what I took away from this is, you've got to find your own path. You've got to break out somehow of that 9 to 5 pattern to truly be original. I guess that's a bit of a message to take from it. So, in essence, from this part, I'd like you to think about that. I think that sort of summarizes, I think, what we're talking about here. It's what Ken Robinson was saying. That's a good takeaway. But a lot of people say, well, you don't understand, I work in my own office. How many people work at home on their own? Quite a lot of the time. It doesn't make it exactly creative, does it? I mean, that's not my office, by the way. That's I think mine's a little bit more decorated than that, but a lot of people do work in silo, on their own, staring at magnolia walls all day, trying to be creative 9 to 5. It is hard work. And it is a real challenge for people to break out of that, to collaborate, to create ideas, to look out the window, to go for walks, you know, because it's just not the environment they work in. But we need to find ways, you know, we have to do it. We have to find the marvellous in amongst the day-to-day grind, the writings on the wall. What I've been talking about is making things desirable from a creative perspective, but these 3 items here, this comes from design thinking. Now, design thinking is trying to apply creativity to a workplace situation, to an organisation. It's about making a product effective. So it takes into account 2 other things as well. Oh yes, you can be creative, but it has to be viable. It has to fit with the culture of the business, obviously. It has to fit the learners. It has to bring out the right emotion. It has to make the right change. But unfortunately, yes, it needs to work on the infrastructure as well. So there's technical considerations as well. So yes, we can be creative, but we do need to consider these 2 other things because they will make it work in the workplace. Okay, so what do we do to meet some of these huge challenges? Well, I put 3 things together for you. We steal stuff. We don't reinvent the wheel every time. I think that's the first thing, is there is so much great material out there that you can curate, you can sort, you can filter, just to flick switches as a starting point. Do not start from scratch. There's some fantastic resources. Warmup. I think this is one of the most important things. You know, you do not go into a creative meeting, sit down and say, right, let's be creative. You know, you're not creative unless you're having fun. You know, we do some really simple things just to get people laughing, to get people in that child mind, if you like. It breaks down barriers. The results are significantly better if you just do a few simple things just to get people in the mood. It's a horrible word, but ideation, whatever you want to call it, is the process of actually coming up with ideas. And again, there's some simple techniques which I'm going to show you, which we use, which we think has just taken things to a new level. So stealing stuff, what do? Who uses some of these sites? Pinterest. There are some great curated resources out there ready for you to use. I'm going to give you a link to this at the end, so you can take it away if you want. Just a quick look at a couple of those. Pinterest, we all use it, I'm sure. And I've just set up a search here. I'm creating a course on data security, for example. Type that in. The great thing about Pinterest is there's so many of these great infographics. I mean, love them or hate them, they are quite creative. You know, it's quite consolidation of a lot of data onto a single graphic. There might be certain combinations that you think, well, I like that from that one, I like this one. This one is the way I could combine the 2. It's a great place to start. There's such a huge amount of information there as a starting point. There's another one I quite like called OnSite Inspire. For example, I'm creating an e-learning course. I want it to be dark, maybe a film noir style, but I also want it to be fun. Is that possible? I'm not sure, but type those 2 keywords into this site, and it gives you, it filters out the sites which might fit that category. So I've got one here called the Kennedys. I'm not sure why it's fun, but okay, they've sort of got it. It's dark. There's an element of childlike representation there. Again, just 2 simple examples. There are loads and loads of these, but again, it might just flick a switch. It's a great place to start. So what else can we do? Collect stuff. I collect pictures. Give you a few seconds. I just find it really entertaining. Anything that makes me laugh, that makes me stop and think, I capture it. I'm not saying I'm going to use this, but again, if you just go through, look at them occasionally, it just puts you in a different mindset. There are hundreds of these things. Basic, I know, but that's the way my mind works. This is quite a common one. I don't hang around in toilets, by the way. That was from the internet. But I did sleep on it a loo once. And then something a bit cleverer, a bit more good marketing. Well, that's just really clever design, I think. So simple, very memorable. Again, it's just combining different things. You know, we've got essence of reality there against the product, which is really neat. And something like that, human fleas. I mean, that's just genius. It just looks so real, doesn't it? So yeah, curate your own stuff as well. Stuff you like. That's just stuff that makes you stop for more than 5 seconds. That's one of my own. I found that. It's been there such a long time, it's gone molded. I haven't realized the irony of it yet, obviously. Okay, so curation is one thing. We need to warm up, as I mentioned. It's really important to do that. Loads of techniques to do this, but what we do are things. I've done this in a workshop recently. It was hilarious. This one's called nickname warm-up. Literally, you've got a bag full of nicknames. Each person in the group chooses one. They've got to take 2 minutes to describe how they got that nickname as a child. It's fun. It's hilarious. Particularly if you've got like a management hierarchy in a meeting, in a kick-off meeting, senior manager who might have a bit more clout than the others. It's a very leveling exercise, this, because everyone then assumes that name for the duration of the exercise. There was a famous example of a senior director actually picking that name, and the whole room went quiet. And he looked at it, and after a few seconds, he just got completely into the whole thing. And I hope that actually level things and they had a better experience as a consequence. Simple stuff, but it's getting people laughing, it's getting people thinking like kids. You might have seen this one as well. There are loads of examples like this. A sheet of paper, 60 circles on it. You've got 2 minutes to make as many of those circles into recognizable objects as you can. Again, it may be a smaller group activity you can do on your own. It could be triangles, it could be squares, it doesn't really matter. It's just getting that sort of fluency going in terms of ideas. You can even cheat. But I think that shows a bit of an application. I quite like that. Great activity, and there are templates for these online as well. So we need to warm up. You know, it gets people talking. It levels the field. Really important. And then we come to ideation, or brainstorming, as it can be called. We prefer this, it's a bit more modern. Techniques for doing that. This is quite a nice one. We'll not use this ourselves, but I've seen examples of it being used. The empathy map is quite a nice one. If you've maybe got quite a behavioural challenge for a training course, maybe you've interviewed some learners or aspects of the audience, you've got some information. The next stage is actually to try and come up with a creative treatment. If you can kind of position the thoughts and feelings of the end user in a graph like this, so you could use coloured post-its, green for positive stuff, red for negative, yellow for things which are kind of intermediate. Drop them in these kind of zones, see how people, what the observed stuff is, the stuff that you're seeing against the stuff which is more hidden away. You might see a pattern. It might be that load of green stuff actually in the workplace, as in everyone's really positive, but loads of red stuff on this side. You know, people are actually feeling really bad about this situation. It might draw new inferences from what you're trying to do. You might just come up with a novel treatment based on what you see here. So again, it's a really nice visual exercise that's collaborative. It gets people talking. It breaks through creative barriers quite well. And this is one that we've used quite a lot, and it's really is quite effective. Very simple. It's called Brainwriting 635. Ideally with 6 people, it doesn't really matter. 6 people come up with 3 ideas in 5 minutes. Okay, so you've got a sheet of paper, 3 ideas. You pass it on to the next person, and you receive a new one. You then put on 3 more ideas in another 5 minutes. Goes all the way around. With 6 people, that's 108 ideas, I think. It's fun. It gets hard as you go on, obviously, because you do run out of ideas. But what you start to do is you start reading what everyone else has put, and maybe elaborating on previous ideas as well. So it evolves over time. Sort of thing you end up with is a sheet like this. Now what you'll see from here, there's an individual there who's actually said, well, I like that, but you could elaborate on it. And then each person can then look at the sheet they've ended up with and kind of summarize what they're seeing. You're going to see patterns, hopefully. And hopefully between the group then, they've got a really good base for coming up with something quite novel, quite out there. This is done in silence, by the way, to kind of not hinder anyone's creativity, and then eventually the discussion takes place. Really works. Really does work. So what happens when it does work? Well, as I say, we've done it a number of times, some of these exercises. I just want to show you 3 examples of courses where we feel we've gone a little bit further in terms of creativity. Just a few screen grabs, really. One of the first things we do, though, before that, is often we'll do what we call a smorgasbord of design, particularly where there's a stakeholder or a customer involved. Now, you can pick certain criteria. So in this case, I think we went from more abstract to more realistic, and then more detailed to less detailed. So then as a group, you can say, well, okay, well, I don't want it to be too abstract, but I want a lot of detail. And it's quite a nice kind of discussion point then, that you can find a style that actually works. One of the first examples I've got here is something for a police force that we did who had a real problem with ethical behaviour. Classic example would be a policeman who goes into a Starbucks where they get discounted coffee, walking up to the counter, getting a free coffee, but in sight of the public. It was a tricky situation because it didn't go down too well in the community. So there was a lot of issues like that for them. But they'd done the e-learning, they knew what they should be doing, but they weren't doing it. What this individual said, he said, we want 4-minute animated videos. And I want them to be as wacky as you can, which is a great creative brief. So we went away and thought about something completely out there. They want to watch the videos and then really just have a discussion about the outcomes of, how are we going to actually handle some of these situations. So yeah, we went through the roof with this one. We came up with the Great Lancashire Cake-Off. So this is a Bakeoff scenario, completely removed from anything to do with policing, where a policeman goes to you might recognise some of these characters. They're based on real Vegas. But he steals someone else's cakes, of course, shocking behaviour, and tries and puts them in as his own. This is conceptual, obviously, at this stage, but it just shows you the sort of direction we're going. We actually had 2 ideas for this one. This is a situation based on the great northern knights of old, who are like a Monty Python type characters who did everything by the book, but just made a lot of goofs along the way. So creatively gone mad in this situation. Second situation was for Boots the chemist, who wanted to teach the entire workforce about cash flow at a business level. So the challenge is there. How do you teach someone who works part-time in a small store in the middle of nowhere about stock flow of a huge multinational organisation? Well, we took it back to basics. Think about Jesse Boots. I hope he doesn't mind. But opening his first store, he had cash flow issues. Let's take it absolutely back to basics. So we chose quite a Heath Robinson type design for this, stripping it back to its bare basics, and putting things across in a very layman's terms, not talking business speak. This is the sort of exercise, the creative brief that we came up with. Using a lot of props, visual props as well, to kind of get the essence of what cash flow is all about. The final one this is work in progress, actually. This is one for Tesco we're doing, who deliver a lot of compliance, as you can imagine, and they wanted something on fire safety, but they wanted a game. So we looked at the audience. Store managers, we understood, were very competitive, but it's all well and good designing a game, but it has to fit those other 2 quadrants. It has to be viable for the business. It has to be technically feasible as well. So yeah, there was a creative exercise we undertook, but then we did pare it down quite a lot to make sure that it was going to work in the workplace. I'll just show you a little snippet of this. As I say, this is work in progress, but basically we've got a game engine going on here. So people can choose an avatar, they can walk themselves around the board, as they cross certain zones, the content is unlocked as they go. I mean, this is actually a game engine that's sitting on top of quite a standard storyline course, but we're actually integrating the two. So we're given an essence of randomization, an essence of choice. But actually, the rules are quite constrained. You know, we are making sure that they achieve those objectives. So yes, creativity, but it's been put in a very strict business context of you must do this compliance training. But I guess we've just given it a nice creative brush. But it's really a nice project to work on. Okay, so just 3 little examples of what we've achieved, we think, through some of these creative techniques. If you want to learn more, I read this book and I think it did enlighten me. It's a really nice summary. Some of the things I've been talking about are from this book by the Kelly brothers, who formed IDEO in the States and work a lot with Stanford, Microsoft, big organizations. It's a great reference and it's really inspiring. So take a look at that one. Before we go, I want you to make a pledge though. I want you to make a pledge to be creative. And I'm going to be quite childish about this. I'm going to stand here for 10 seconds and not say anything until you've made that pledge. Okay, that was awkward. Thank you very much. I hope there's some takeaways there. That's me. That's my organisation. If you want to know more, please come and see me. And there's a link there to the presentation if you want to go and have a look. Thank you very much.